We've known about Pinky's family ever since season 1, but we've never had an episode that made any of them the main focus. To be honest, I've been rather curious about what kind of story they could make around Pinky interacting with her family. However, it was a bit surprising to see the writers add one more sister to Pinky's family back during Pinky Pride. I mean, why couldn't they make this story with one of Pinky's sisters that showed up during season 1? Well, I suppose it doesn't matter all that much provided they do something interesting with the story, and at the very least I am glad that the MLP staff made some kind of effort to introduce this new family member before this episode, as opposed to suddenly springing it on us like they did with Twilight and Shining Armor back during the season 2 finale. So let's take a look at just what kind of story the writers have in mind for Pinky's sister. As the episode begins, we see the main six gathered before dawn to test some rock candy. Pinky is going all out on trying to impress Maud and has a very clear idea on what is needed. Or at least she thinks she does. We get a new variation on show animation, which is always a welcome change in small bits like this. When we finally meet Maud, she seems especially mellow about most everything, even when she's talking about rocks. Now, I use the word mellow instead of uninterested because she actually does have hobbies and she does know what she likes. She just does most everything in a bland and lackluster way, though. However, what makes this fascinating is the fact that despite Maud being so very different from Pinky as far as personality and interests, Pinky is still especially excited having her around. Even the way Pinky describes her sister during that custom animation sequence paints a very different picture. Pinky genuinely believes that Maud is the best sister ever. Is Pinky in denial here? She does seem like she's having fun even though everyone else is rather bored. But then this is Pinky we're talking about here. She finds fun in even the smallest things. Which, come to think of it, might actually relate more to her sister's behavior than meets the eye. I mean, we know what their upbringing was like. After all, they've been spending most their lives living in an Amish paradise. And as such, Pinky would have had to find ways of having her fun in even the most dreary of circumstances. Having a sister who shows so little enthusiasm for most everything around her, I can imagine that this is where Pinky's overly positive and overly fun-seeking personality comes from. Pinky ended up learning to look on the bright side of things even in such a bland and boring upbringing. Now, going through this episode, I was rather curious about what sort of lesson the writers intended to teach. Was Pinky going to learn about accepting her sister's behavior despite being so different? Actually, no. Pinky was already aware of her sister's attitude about life and managed to have fun with her anyways. Was Maud going to learn more about how to better connect with her sister by taking part in the fun? Actually, no. I found it admirable that the writers didn't try to change Maud from who she is just to teach a moral about friendship. In the end, it was the rest of the main six along with Maud who discovered that they did have something in common with each other. Seeing Maud immediately spring into action by obliterating that falling boulder was impressive. And afterwards, no one had to put aside their interests and hobbies for the sake of the friendship. Once again, Maud managed to surprise me when she showed that box filled with rock necklaces from the past. She doesn't like candy, but still treasures every one of them because Pinky gave them to her. Kudos to the writers for presenting a lesson that managed to surprise me while still being worthwhile. So what about the rest of the episode? Well, there were parts that felt a little slow and predictable, but they were usually followed up by another scene or character interaction that made me laugh. Like Rainbow's reaction when Maud says that Boulder was hiding in her pocket. Or when Maud managed to throw or kick that rock much further than Rainbow did, which caused a mini explosion, followed by Rainbow's face when Maud says that she's not really into winning. I was also surprised to see Maud actually eating the rock from the muffin basket, and it didn't even faze her. Could the rock farm where they grew up actually be intended for food? Really? That would change up a lot of headcanons about why Pinky's family was farming rocks. We also saw Pinky's mane deflating again, even more so than it did during Pinky Pride. And her reaction is to try making such an extensive activity that everyone would have something they like doing. I was worried that the writers might be trying to teach a lesson about doing things you don't like for the sake of your friends, but in the end that really didn't work. Going with the far better lesson of finding that deeply hidden common ground without trying to change yourself was a surprise for me, and a very welcome one at that. With that said, however, I don't find that much about the episode to give it a high rewatch value. I know the slow pace and bland conversation was supposed to be the point of Maud's character. I do think some of her puns were clever, and like I mentioned, there were some parts of the episode that legitimately surprised me in a good way. But going into this episode while knowing exactly what's going to happen, I don't think there's that much entertainment value. Maybe if they showed all of Pinky's family when the rest of the main six went to visit the rock farm? I mean, having an entire episode dedicated to Pinky's family adjusting to the rest of the main six has some interesting possibilities. But as it is, I don't think there's much to leave a lasting impression aside from some new insights on Pinky's upbringing. Glad I saw it, but I'm probably not going to watch it again anytime soon. In the meantime, though, I would like to hear your thoughts. Do you think Maud Pie makes for an interesting contrast to Pinkie Pie? Do you have any new theories about Pinky's upbringing on the rock farm? Is there any potential in having Maud or any other members of Pinky's family coming back for a future story? I would like to hear your thoughts on Maud Pie, and here's to hoping that we don't have to see ponies subsisting entirely on a diet of rocks. I am Dr. Wolf, and I look forward to hearing from you.